You have read the articles about testosterone. You have seen the advertisements for supplements promising to restore what time has stolen. You have heard that reclaiming your hormones requires extreme measures, brutal gym sessions, restrictive diets, expensive protocols, maybe even injections that bind you to clinics and monitoring for the rest of your life. The message from every direction is that hormonal decline is either inevitable or fixable only through heroic intervention. Either accept the slow fade or commit to something dramatic. So, you do nothing. The gap between where you are and where the solutions seem to demand you be is too wide to cross. You cannot imagine yourself grinding through intense workouts 5 days a week. You cannot afford the clinics and the blood work and the ongoing prescriptions. You resign yourself to feeling a little less vital each year, a little less driven, a little more tired. This is just aging, you tell yourself. This is just what happens. But what if the most powerful intervention for your hormones is not extreme at all? What if the solution has been available to you every single day, requiring no equipment, no gym membership, no prescription, no dramatic commitment? What if the simple act of walking, performed consistently and with sufficient volume, produces hormonal changes that rival what you imagined only aggressive protocols could achieve? This is what I want to show you. Not walking as gentle exercise for elderly people, not walking as what you do when you cannot manage real workouts, walking as a hormonal intervention that operates through multiple biochemical pathways simultaneously, producing effects that compound over time into transformations you can feel in your energy, your motivation, your body composition, your mood, and yes, your testosterone levels. 8,000 steps. That is the number that research keeps circling back to as a threshold for protection. Not a magic number, but a meaningful one. A volume of daily movement associated with reduced mortality, improved metabolic markers, and hormonal profiles that differ measurably from those who move less. Let me explain what happens inside your body when you consistently hit this target, and why walking works through mechanisms that more intense exercise sometimes cannot access. The conventional belief about testosterone is that you must stress your body significantly to stimulate its production. Lift heavy weights, sprint until you cannot breathe, push to failure. The logic seems sound. Hormones respond to challenge, so greater challenge should produce greater response. But this logic misses something crucial about how hormonal systems actually operate under chronic conditions. Testosterone production is not just about stimulation. It is about environment. Your body produces hormones in response to signals about what kind of life you are living. Are you active or sedentary? Are you stressed or calm? Are you well fed or starving? Are you thriving or merely surviving? The signals your body receives through your daily patterns shape the hormonal environment in which you exist, far more than occasional intense efforts can overcome. This is why consistency matters more than intensity for long-term hormonal health. A single brutal workout might spike certain hormones temporarily, but living a sedentary life punctuated by occasional intense sessions does not create the sustained environment that supports optimal hormone production. What creates that environment is daily movement, the kind of movement that walking provides, repeated day after day until it becomes the baseline against which your body calibrates itself. Researchers documented a dose-response relationship between daily step count and testosterone levels in men. For every additional 1,000 steps walked daily, testosterone increases by a measurable amount. This is not theoretical. This is observed in studies examining large populations, controlling for confounding factors, and finding consistent associations. Men who walk more have higher testosterone. The relationship is linear up to a point, meaning more steps continue producing more benefit until a plateau is reached somewhere beyond the volumes most people achieve. The 8,000 step threshold represents a meaningful boundary in this relationship. Men who consistently achieve this volume show significantly better hormonal profiles than those who fall below it. The protective effect becomes substantial at this level. Below 8,000, risk accumulates. Above it, protection strengthens. This does not mean 7,000 is useless, or 9,000 is dramatically better. It means that 8,000 represents a volume where the data suggests meaningful hormonal support is occurring. The sedentary alternative is far worse than most people realize. When daily movement drops below certain thresholds, the body interprets this as a signal that circumstances have changed dramatically. Perhaps food is scarce and conservation is necessary. Perhaps injury has occurred and activity must be limited. Perhaps winter has arrived and hibernation mode is appropriate. The body does not know you are sitting at a desk for cultural reasons. It knows only that movement has stopped, and it responds accordingly. One of the first responses to sustained inactivity is a reduction in testosterone production. This makes biological sense from a survival perspective. Testosterone drives behaviors and physiological processes associated with reproduction, competition, and building. These are expensive activities that a body under resource constraint cannot afford. When movement stops, the body assumes resources are limited and begins shutting down the expensive systems. Testosterone production is curtailed. The drive and energy that testosterone provided fade. You become a more conservative organism, protecting what you have rather than building more. This sedentary shutdown happens faster than most people expect. Within days of dramatically reduced activity, measurable changes in insulin sensitivity occur. Fat storage patterns shift. Muscle tissue begins to atrophy. The hormonal environment degrades. You might feel this as a vague heaviness, a reduced motivation, a sense that everything requires more effort than it should. You attribute it to stress or aging or poor sleep, but often it is simply what happens when bodies designed for movement stop moving. The encouraging news is that reactivating movement reverses many of these changes. The body is plastic. It adapts to the signals it receives. When walking resumes, when daily step counts climb back toward ancestral norms, the shutdown reverses. Insulin sensitivity improves. Fat storage patterns shift again. Testosterone production ramps back up. The restoration is not instantaneous, but it is reliable. Give the body the signal that movement is normal again, and it recalibrates toward the hormonal environment that movement supports. Now let me introduce a mechanism that explains why walking specifically supports testosterone in ways that more intense exercise sometimes does not. This involves the relationship between testosterone and cortisol, a relationship that operates like a seesaw where one goes up as the other goes down. Testosterone and cortisol are both steroid hormones, and they share precursor molecules in their synthesis pathways. When your body produces more cortisol, fewer resources are available for testosterone production. Chronic stress, which elevates cortisol persistently, effectively steals the raw materials and enzymatic attention that would otherwise support testosterone. This is sometimes called the cortisol steal, and it explains why stressed men often have low testosterone even when nothing else seems wrong. Intense exercise is a stressor. This is not a criticism of intense exercise. Stress is often how adaptation occurs. But the cortisol response to intense training is real and significant. A hard workout spikes cortisol. In someone who is well recovered, well nourished, and not otherwise stressed, this spike is temporary and acceptable. The body recovers, testosterone rises, adaptation occurs, but in someone already carrying significant stress from work, relationships, finances, sleep deprivation, and other modern burdens, adding intense exercise adds more cortisol to an already elevated pool. The steal intensifies, testosterone suffers. Walking produces a profoundly different cortisol response. Rather than spiking cortisol, walking tends to lower it. The mechanism involves your nervous system and how it interprets rhythmic forward movement through space. When you walk, your visual field flows past you in a specific pattern called optic flow. This pattern signals your brain that you are moving purposefully through your environment, a state that evolution associated with safety rather than threat. Your brain interprets this movement as evidence that you are not being chased, not fleeing, not in immediate danger. The threat detection centers calm down. Cortisol production decreases. This is why a walk can clear your head when you feel stressed. This is why movement feels better than sitting with your anxiety. The nervous system is receiving signals that the danger has passed, that forward motion is occurring, that the situation is under control. These signals translate into reduced cortisol output, which frees resources for testosterone production, which shifts your hormonal environment toward one that supports drive, energy, and vitality rather than one dominated by stress and conservation. The distinction between walking and intense exercise is not that one is good and one is bad. Both have value, but they produce different hormonal effects, and understanding this distinction helps you deploy each appropriately. If your life is already high stress, if cortisol is already chronically elevated, adding intense exercise may be counterproductive for your hormones, even though it feels virtuous and hard. What you might need instead is more walking, more gentle movement that lowers stress rather than adding to it, more signals of safety that free your body to produce the testosterone it has been conserving. Another mechanism through which walking supports testosterone involves the fat tissue around your midsection. Visceral fat, the fat that accumulates around your organs and pushes your belly outward, is not passive storage. It is hormonally active tissue that participates in your endocrine environment in ways that directly harm testosterone levels. Visceral fat contains high concentrations of an enzyme called aromatase. This enzyme converts testosterone into estrogen. The more visceral fat you carry, the more aromatase activity is occurring, and the more of your testosterone is being transformed into a hormone you do not want elevated. This creates a vicious cycle. Low testosterone promotes fat storage. Fat storage increases aromatase activity. Increased aromatase activity further lowers testosterone. The cycle perpetuates itself once it begins, and reversing it requires interrupting the process somewhere. Walking interrupts the cycle by targeting visceral fat through a specific metabolic pathway. During low-intensity movement like walking, your body preferentially burns fat for fuel rather than carbohydrates. The longer you walk, the more fat oxidation occurs. Over time, consistent walking reduces visceral fat stores. Less visceral fat means less aromatase. Less aromatase means less testosterone is converted to estrogen. More testosterone remains available to produce the effects you want. This fat-burning mechanism works differently from intense exercise. High-intensity efforts burn more calories per minute, but they rely more heavily on carbohydrate stores for fuel. The caloric burn is impressive, but it is not necessarily targeting the visceral fat that houses aromatase. Walking, sustained over longer periods, taps into fat metabolism more directly. It is slower, but more specifically targeted at the tissue that is harming your hormonal environment. This is why walking every day produces different body composition effects than working out intensely a few times per week. The consistent daily fat oxidation compounds over time. The visceral fat shrinks gradually but persistently. The aromatase burden decreases. The testosterone to estrogen ratio improves. You might not look dramatically different quickly, but the internal environment is shifting toward one that supports male hormones rather than undermining them. Blood sugar and insulin represent another pathway through which walking supports testosterone. This mechanism operates through the metabolic signaling that determines whether your body perceives itself as thriving or struggling. When blood sugar rises after meals, insulin is released to drive that glucose into cells. In a healthy metabolism, this process is efficient and brief, but when insulin sensitivity is degraded, more insulin is required to accomplish the same task. Chronically elevated insulin sends signals throughout the body that affect multiple systems, including the reproductive system. High insulin tells the body that energy is abundant, which sounds good but actually creates problems for testosterone. The signaling associated with chronic insulin elevation promotes fat storage rather than fat burning, favors estrogen over testosterone, and creates an environment where the body prioritizes growth of fat tissue over growth of muscle tissue. The hormonal environment of chronically elevated insulin is not conducive to optimal testosterone production. Walking after meals produces a remarkable effect on this system. When you walk within an hour of eating, your muscles are contracting and demanding fuel. The large muscles of your legs act as glucose sinks, pulling sugar from your bloodstream to power their movement. This glucose uptake occurs independently of insulin through a pathway activated by muscle contraction itself. The blood sugar spike that would otherwise require a large insulin response is blunted, because muscles are actively absorbing the glucose without needing insulin to open the door. The result is a flatter blood sugar curve and a smaller insulin response. Over time, walking after meals trains your body to handle carbohydrates more efficiently. Insulin sensitivity improves. The chronic elevation resolves. The signaling environment shifts toward one that supports testosterone production, rather than suppressing it. The specific muscles involved in walking deserve attention because their involvement is part of why walking is so metabolically powerful. Your legs contain the largest muscle groups in your body. The quadriceps, hamstrings, and gluteal muscles together comprise an enormous mass of tissue that, when active, demands significant metabolic resources. Each step involves contraction of these muscles. 8,000 steps means thousands of contractions of the largest glucose-absorbing tissues you possess. This repeated large muscle activation produces cumulative effects that sitting cannot replicate and that upper body exercise cannot match. The legs are uniquely positioned to influence blood sugar through sheer tissue volume. When they are active, they are absorbing glucose. When they are idle, that glucose has nowhere productive to go. Walking keeps the largest metabolic engines in your body running at low intensity throughout the day, smoothing blood sugar fluctuations and reducing the insulin burden that would otherwise suppress testosterone. The psychological dimension of walking interacts with the hormonal dimension through dopamine and motivation pathways. Testosterone is often described in terms of its physical effects, muscle and libido and body composition, but its effects on psychology are equally important. Testosterone supports motivation, drive, competitive spirit, the sense that goals are worth pursuing and that you are capable of achieving them. When testosterone falls, this psychological orientation shifts. Life feels less compelling, goals seem more distant. The drive to act diminishes. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with motivation and reward, interacts closely with testosterone. The two reinforce each other in a feedback loop. Higher testosterone supports higher dopamine activity. Higher dopamine makes you more likely to take action. Action produces achievements that further stimulate both testosterone and dopamine. The cycle is self-reinforcing when it operates in the positive direction. Inactivity breaks this cycle. When you stop moving, dopamine activity decreases. Without dopamine driving motivation, action becomes harder. Without action, the achievements that would stimulate further dopamine and testosterone do not occur. Lethargy begets more lethargy. The cycle operates in reverse, spiraling downward rather than upward. Walking interrupts the downward spiral and initiates an upward one. The simple act of sustained movement increases dopamine. Endorphins released during longer walks. The psychological sense of accomplishment from completing a walk, even a modest one, registers in reward circuitries. These effects combine to shift the motivational landscape. You feel more inclined to take action in other domains. The action you take produces results that stimulate further motivation. The positive cycle begins operating. This is sometimes called the winner effect, the phenomenon whereby success in one domain primes the brain for confidence and action in other domains. Walking can serve as the initial success that triggers this effect. It is achievable. It requires no special skill or equipment. It produces immediate psychological benefits alongside its long-term hormonal benefits. It is a low-threshold entry point into the positive cycle that more demanding activities cannot provide when motivation has already crashed. Not all walking produces equal hormonal benefit. The pace and intention with which you walk matters for the metabolic and endocrine effects you're trying to achieve. Casual strolling, the wandering pace of a shopping mall or a leisurely window shopping expedition, produces minimal metabolic stimulus. Your heart rate barely elevates. Your muscles are not challenged. The blood sugar effects are present but modest. The cortisol-lowering benefits occur, but the full hormonal profile improvement requires more. Brisk walking, where you move with purpose and feel your breathing slightly elevated, hits the metabolic sweet spot for hormonal benefit. Your heart rate rises into a zone where fat burning is optimized. Your muscles are genuinely working. The glucose-absorbing effects intensify. The cardiovascular stimulus produces adaptations over time. This is walking with intention, walking as exercise rather than merely as transportation or leisure. The opposite extreme, walking so fast that you approach running intensity, shifts the metabolic and hormonal profile in the wrong direction for these purposes. Intense effort produces cortisol spikes. It shifts fuel usage away from fat and toward carbohydrates. It creates recovery demands that walking is not supposed to create. The point of walking as a hormonal tool is to occupy the space between sedentary and strenuous, to provide consistent stimulus without triggering stress responses. The breathing test is a simple way to calibrate your walking pace. At optimal pace, you should be breathing noticeably, but still able to converse. You're not gasping. You're not straining. You're simply moving briskly enough that your body has to work a little harder than it does at rest. This is the zone where hormonal benefits accumulate without cortisol costs. The timing of walks throughout the day affects their cumulative impact. Rather than completing all 8,000 steps in a single session, distributing walks throughout the day may produce superior metabolic effects. A morning walk, a post-lunch walk, an evening walk. This pattern provides repeated metabolic stimulus that keeps blood sugar stable across the day, rather than allowing long sedentary periods between walking sessions. Post-meal walks are particularly valuable for the blood sugar and insulin effects I described. The glucose is entering your bloodstream from the meal. The walk immediately captures that glucose for muscle use. The timing is ideal for blunting the spike that would otherwise occur. If you can walk briefly after each major meal, you're intervening precisely when intervention matters most. Multiple shorter walks also reduce the mental barrier to getting started. Contemplating a single long walk can feel daunting when motivation is low. Contemplating a 15-minute walk feels manageable. Breaking the daily volume into smaller sessions makes consistent achievement more likely. And consistency, as I have emphasized throughout, is what produces the sustained hormonal environment changes that matter. Walking outdoors adds another hormonal benefit that indoor walking cannot provide: sunlight exposure. When sunlight reaches your skin, it triggers the synthesis of vitamin D, a compound that functions more like a hormone than a vitamin in many respects. Vitamin D is directly involved in testosterone synthesis. Men with adequate vitamin D levels have higher testosterone than men who are deficient. The relationship is causal, not merely correlational, as demonstrated by studies showing that vitamin D supplementation increases testosterone. Outdoor walking provides vitamin D production, alongside all the other benefits I've described. The movement produces its effects. The sunlight adds its own contribution. The combination multiplies the hormonal benefit beyond what either would provide alone. This is another argument for walking as a foundation. It bundles multiple beneficial exposures into a single accessible activity. The accessibility of walking deserves explicit emphasis because it relates directly to sustainability, and sustainability determines long-term results. Walking requires no gym membership. It requires no special equipment beyond shoes that do not cause pain. It requires no particular skill or training. It requires no driving to a location where exercise happens. It can be performed anywhere, at any time, by anyone with functional legs. This accessibility matters because consistency over time produces hormonal effects that occasional heroic efforts cannot. A workout you can maintain is infinitely more valuable than a workout that is optimal on paper, but impossible to sustain. Walking is maintainable. It fits into breaks between work tasks. It fits into commutes. It fits into evenings when more demanding exercise would be skipped. It accumulates in the background of normal life, rather than requiring dedicated sessions that compete with other priorities. The temptation when learning about hormonal interventions is to seek the most powerful option, the most dramatic protocol, the thing that will produce the fastest and most impressive results. This temptation leads people to skip past foundational practices in pursuit of advanced interventions. They research hormone replacement therapy while remaining sedentary. They purchase expensive supplements while walking less than 3,000 steps daily. They chase pills and injections while ignoring the free, simple, proven intervention available whenever they stand up. This sequence is backwards. The foundation must be established before advanced interventions make sense. Walking represents the foundation. It is where hormonal restoration begins. It is the baseline of daily movement that your body expects and that your hormones require. Without this foundation, other interventions build on unstable ground. Their effects are diminished or negated by the sedentary lifestyle that undermines them. The expensive solutions fail to produce what they promise, because the cheap solution was never implemented. Before you consider testosterone supplementation, before you invest in complex protocols, before you spend money on clinics and blood work and ongoing pharmaceutical relationships, try walking 8,000 steps daily for a sustained period. Give your body the movement signal it requires. Lower cortisol through daily rhythm, reduce visceral fat through consistent fat oxidation, stabilize blood sugar through post-meal movement, activate dopamine through purposeful action. Create the environment in which your endogenous testosterone production can optimize itself. This does not mean advanced interventions are never appropriate. For some men, they are necessary regardless of lifestyle factors. Medical conditions that impair testosterone production will not be overcome through walking alone, but these cases are fewer than the supplement industry would have you believe. Many men with low testosterone are simply men who stopped moving. The deficiency is environmental, not pathological. The solution is behavioral, not pharmaceutical. Let me propose something concrete: a 7-day challenge, 8,000 steps daily for 1 week. Track your steps with whatever device you have available: phone, watch, pedometer. Distribute the steps throughout the day, with particular attention to walking after meals. Walk outdoors when possible. Walk briskly, with intention, breathing noticeably but not straining. Observe what changes over those 7 days. Your sleep may improve, your mood may lift, your energy may stabilize, the afternoon slump may soften, the mental fog may clear. These are the immediate effects of consistent walking, the effects you can feel before blood tests would show hormonal changes. They are the signals that the hormonal environment is shifting, that the mechanisms I described are operating, that your body is recalibrating toward a healthier baseline. If 1 week produces noticeable changes, extend to 2 weeks, then a month, then make this your permanent baseline. 8,000 steps is not an extreme demand. It is roughly 4 miles depending on stride length. It is an hour of walking if done continuously, or multiple shorter sessions distributed through the day. It is achievable for most people with functional legs and some time to allocate. It is the foundation on which hormonal health is built. You have been told that fixing your hormones requires extreme effort. You have been told that testosterone optimization demands brutal sacrifice. You have been told that accessible solutions cannot possibly work, because if they worked, everyone would be doing them. These messages serve the interests of those selling extreme solutions. They do not serve your interests. The truth is that your body responds to signals. The signal of daily movement, sustained and consistent, tells your body that you are active, that resources are flowing, that competition and reproduction are appropriate, that testosterone production should proceed. The absence of that signal tells your body to conserve, to protect, to shut down the expensive systems that movement would justify. 8,000 steps is the signal. It is achievable. It is free. It requires nothing but the decision to walk and the consistency to do it daily. It operates through mechanisms that are understood, documented, and reliable. It forms the foundation on which other interventions, if they prove necessary, can be built. Your hormones are not fixed by genetics or doomed by age. They respond to how you live. Walk like your hormones depend on it because they do. Move through your days with the volume and consistency that your biology expects. Create the environment in which testosterone thrives rather than the environment in which it withdraws. The solution was never 8 weeks away after you completed some extreme protocol. The solution was always waiting outside your door, available every morning, every lunch break, every evening. 8,000 steps, consistent daily movement through space, the simple ancient act of walking, producing hormonal effects that rival what modern interventions promise at a fraction of the cost and with none of the side effects. Start today, your hormones are listening.